Welcome back to the PFC podcast. The views and opinions you are about to hear are the speakers and do not necessarily reflect those of anyone else. Now on to the podcast.
So, welcome to the Prolonged Field Care podcast. Today I'm with Phil Gonzalez, the legend of combat medicine. How are you doing today?
Very good, Dennis. Thanks for having me on the program. I do appreciate it.
So, everybody knows you as the most interesting man alive. And, I just wanted to take the opportunity and whatever pull I had to get you on our podcast so we can just chat about you and what you've done for just your experiences treating patients and what you've done just for the library of knowledge that we have to work with now and what we teach to our students. So again, I thank you very much.
Well, thank you. I do appreciate it, Dennis. Actually, let me comment. Dennis and I met each other here about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And I was down in the jungles of Colombia. Had just come back from Afghanistan after 4 years.
Yeah.
And running the roads there and playing Russian roulette. Truly, one road in, one road out with the mail convoys. We lost 30% of our people getting that mail to the FOBs. And I got this offer to come and teach at the schoolhouse. And Dennis helped me out via, I think we're doing Skype or Zoom or something, to do my interview from the jungles of South America. And here I am today. So thank you. That goes back a ways.
Yeah, it definitely does. And when you first got here, you got to see the intensity that is dentistry and teaching.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Your humor still lasts till this day, and I do appreciate it. So actually, you and I were talking a little while ago about how to go about this podcast, and I thought we would just start with where I began in the military. That goes back almost 50 years. 68 is when I first went in. I wasn't a Rhodes Scholar. I guess most guys that went in the military weren't Rhodes Scholars or they wouldn't be in the military.
Right.
But I had set the school record, I think, at North Texas State at that time for the lowest grade point average ever.
Right.
And I changed my majors about 4 times in the first semester. So I was on my way to Vietnam at that time when we had the draft still.
Right.
And so I did do some work at a small junior college, which truly was the better choice, and studied journalism and photography, things that I liked a lot. But because I had set such a stellar record, the two didn't balance out, and I knew I was going to be picked up for the draft. You couldn't get in any kind of reserve unit because they were all full.
Right.
And I enlisted in what was known as the Army Security Agency, ASA.
Mm-hmm.
And that later in the years became what we know today as the Defense Intelligence Agency.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I got my introduction. I did some training at Fort Devens as a high-speed Morse interceptor. The idea of the Army Security Agency in Vietnam at the time, they were copying enemy code. They would have aircraft high above, or they'd have intercepts that they were doing to triangulate enemy transmitters. And that's a story that will unfold shortly on how I was able to get into such difficult and dangerous situations in Vietnam with 5th Special Forces.
Yeah. So, we already kind of kicked it off. So you arrive in Vietnam. What was that process like?
That, funny you should mention that. That was very interesting for me. As a young man, arrived in Vietnam. You've seen the pictures of new arrivals where they have all the green fatigues on and they all carrying their packets of information. And there's the old soldiers that are leaving and they've got these weathered combat boots and their fatigues are rotted off and they're looking at you like, I'm glad I'm not that guy.
Yeah.
Or they would make comments like, you see that guy over there? He won't make it.
Yeah.
Who are they looking at? What do they know, And you see that guy with the paratrooper wings? Wow, my wings on. I was proud of him. They said, yeah, he'll make it. And I go, yeah. What are they talking about? So that was my introduction into the first minute into Vietnam.
Right.
We processed in Special Forces to 5th Special Forces in Nha Trang.
Up till that point, did you go through the Q course, or?
At that point, I had just done basic airborne and some orientation to Special Forces.
Okay.
The next orientation came after you arrived in Nha Trang. Nobody went directly to their camps or to their operations without at least allowing you to break your feet into your boots. And so they sent us to a place called Han Tre Island. Now, Han Tre was off the coast, and you did all your communications, rucksack, language, everything to get you acclimatized to the heat. And then we ran operations from there. And then came back in, and we got all of our equipment and our assignments. As an Army Security Agency, I was to be assigned to special operations that allowed me to be the intermediary between real high-speed intelligence that we're going to get hit by enemy transmitters being located around us, and so on. So, as I mentioned, Army Security Agency. I mean, it sounds like really, smart people, and my security clearance was extremely high. It was like top secret, crypto, special intelligence, and then some. So I was very valuable. And when I processed into Nha Trang, I went through what we call the Public Information Office, and they want to know about your hometown, where you're from, in case you should receive some accolades for heroism or stuff. They would write to your hometown and do a little article for the hometown newspaper. I did that, and they asked me, do you have any experience in journalism? I said, well, yeah, I do. I went to junior college, and I was feature editor for the magazine, and I did some photo shows, and they said, wow, you have a lot of experience. Would you like to come and work with us? We have a magazine called the Green Beret Magazine. And I said, yeah, I'd really like to, but unfortunately, because of my security clearance, my unit would never let me be reassigned. So I started working for him the next day.
Right.
Yeah. It's that quick. I went back to the unit and I told them that, and they said, oh, that's great. Just do some stories on us too. So, okay, fair enough, quid pro quo.
Right.
And so off I went. And some of the operations, one of the most memorable, and to this day, the most horrific, I can see it vividly, was when I was assigned to the 3rd Mobile Strike Force to do a story on operations near a camp called Boonard. Boonard was going to get hit. I had already seen on our big board, our intelligence board, all the different lights coming up that we were plotting enemy transmitters, and they had already been hit. The Mike Force had been in contact for about a week or two. We had lost 54 men still missing in action. These are all Cambodians. We were training our special forces with Cambodian resistance fighters. And so I went in at the tail end of this thing to pick up bodies and weapons and wounded. And that was where I did my story on that. And it goes something like this. Your helicopter's coming in. You can see the smoke in the distance where they're marking the LZ. And in it goes, snapping my shots of the coming in. And I met this little sergeant, a short man, and no rank, anything, in a bunker in the TOC, Tactical Operations Center, is all. And I said, I'm from I'm from the Green Beret Magazine. I need to do a story on our. He says, specialist, just stand over there out of the way, very calm, and you can hear the voices cracking on the radios in the back. Men calling, we're coming in, we got them over this way. They're coming in, they're all around us. We're going to need help. I'm going, wait a minute. I mean, this is surreal. And so later on, when the operation calmed down and they were working these radios in this little bunker with sand and stuff coming down, I found out that this man was the commander of the Mike Force. His name was Lee Mize, or Lee Mize, Congressional Medal of Honor recipient from Korea. A truly bigger-than-life mentor that he was to be for me in the years to come. His operations sergeant at the time was another man that is well-known, recently passed away. His name was Billy Wall. And so I met Billy and Lee Mize and Henry Bailey, a whole bunch of other greats. These were truly my giants over my lifetime that I was, couldn't look back and see that I never could have been as great as these men because they were my role models. And so we went in, pick up our dead and wounded, and there's some stories in that magazine, my photographs of all the guys coming out. We loaded a lot of weapons in these helicopters and bodies, and years later I would see the same scenario in Salvador where we load bodies in, and they would bloat and they would smell, and the helicopter wash would throw the filth and the blood around the helicopter over the windows, and it was just like gore, truly gore. But in came the helicopters wave after wave. I was there meeting with people, collecting weapons, taking photos, writing in my mind what I would do. And the helicopters would all come in. All of a sudden, now the clearing, you could hear this small rocket, shh, like a train, white train. And it hit the cockpit of one of the Hueys and crashed right through there and killed the pilot, didn't go off. And I could see the whole line of helicopters all doing the same movement. They all began to pitch at a 45-degree angle. You could actually envision the collectives of these guys pushing on this cuff and the speakers cracking like, get out, get out, get out. And the whole wave began to lift off, and the power of the rotors, I could see them lifting, pulling up as hard as I could, and off they went. At the same time, all around the clearing that we were in, we were zeroed in. We were the tail end. We were the last ones out. And they knew they had us. We were later to find out that this was the 5th VC Division. And division's a lot of people. A regiment was what they were, probably around 2,000 against our about 50 or 60 or 70 of us. And the sound around the clearing was quiet, and then all of a sudden, boom, 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 boom. The mortars. It was a mortar platoon. They had us circled in, and then this deathly silence as the rounds were in the air. And at that same point in time, I dove into a little foxhole where there was a bunch of Cambodians in there, and then they hit, boom, 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 boom. And you always hear about the guy that got hit by the mortar on the first day in Vietnam and was killed. Well, same scenario, only I was so close to where that round hit. It was closer than me to you, and I was right in the cone where it was up like that. So it missed my face. They just slapped all the dirt in front of my face, and it was gone. And I heard this sound, Boxy, Boxy, Boxy. Now, Boxy is Vietnamese for doctor. Yeah. And our Special Forces medics were all known as Boxies. I mean, if you were a Boxy, you were truly a god in the eyes of the indigenous population, the Montagnards, the Bru, the Stang, the Hmong. So I thought, well, this guy is wounded. You know, I had been through my training over at Han Tre, and I knew what to do, and ran out and grabbed this guy and had his weapon over my shoulder and his rucksack, and I had him under my arm, and I began to run across this clearing, and the distinct sounds of the M16 and the AK-47 are there. So I could hear the AK-47 and hear the snap, and so I thought, well, they're shooting at me, you know. And so down I went, crawling, dragging this man who was wounded, and I drug him, and it's really quiet now. All of a sudden, no more shooting, no more nothing. And I'm dragging him where? I'm dragging, I don't know where I am. And I looked around, and I could see nobody. And then I could see some ruffling of people off in the distance, and I shouted, and nobody could hear me, and I drug him, and it was as close as me to you. I couldn't drag him anymore. And what I'm going to tell you right now has settled with me forever and ever in my dreams. And I left that man there. I looked in his eyes, and I left him, and I got up and I ran where I knew people had gone or followed the trail. And, Years later, a lot of these things would come back to me when I had time at the VA to discuss the evolution of 50 years as a Special Forces medic, and reveal that that hurt me tremendously.
Yeah.
I make no excuses. I did what I thought to do at that moment in time, and I ran. And I was able to link up with the tail end of our little column that was snaking out of the jungle, led by Henry Bailey, Master Sergeant Bailey. And we were popping purple smoke grenades in the back as this little column snaked its way through the jungle, slipping and sliding because of the mud on some of these ravines. I was grabbing tree roots. We had some wounded that we had in ponchos that we were carrying. And as I would carry these and slip, the blood would flow down from these ponchos over me. And I couldn't hold on. And we kept moving and moving. And I truly asked God, please let me see the sunshine one more day. Just one more day, God. And I thought I was very clever, because who would not answer an easy prayer like, you want to see the sunshine one more day? Fine. But in my heart, I knew that if I had one day, I was going to be running like crazy away from here and I'd be alive. And that did come to pass. But before that happened, we had our gunships coming in right over the top of us, maybe 150, 200 feet at most, right over the jungle canopy, full auto. And these were Cobra gunships. They were like narrow and firepower like you wouldn't believe. And the cordite, you could smell it, and the leaves and branches coming down. And you could see little flames dropping all over you as we moved our way out of there to our alternate LZ. Got out of there. We had a secondary LZ that got us out. We had a Chinook came in there and was able to load a lot of us out. And I came back to the base camp. And I remember there were some helicopters sitting there, and I'm fresh out of this battle, and a couple helicopter pilots were sitting on this little LZ there, and I heard this boom, and I dove under the helicopter. It wasn't anything, maybe some bump or something, but that's how heightened it was. A couple of days. I actually came back before I got back to Nha to file my story. I remember flying out of there in a Huey, and the Huey is looking down, and as we're leaving, I see Billy Waugh, and I see Lee Mize, and a group of strikers, Mobile Strike Force members, and they're in water up to their waist. They're coming through the jungle. They're going back in to look for survivors. And I thought, oh my God. And later on, we saw a man out in the jungle. The strikers wore I think it was red and white and blue scarves, and had 3rd Mobile Strike Force on it. And I remember looking down, and they spotted the striker down in the jungle. And we're leaving here, and he's down the jungle, and he's got 2 or 3 rucksacks with him and weapons. He'd been there all night escaping the enemy. And so we dropped this rope on down there and picked this guy up, and we're dragging him out of the jungle, and he's flying down there in the air. We dropped him off on the way out. Didn't make it back to Nha that day. It was a couple of days. Stayed with an old engineer sergeant, a friend of mine from the university where I made such a stellar grade point average.
Right.
And I slept with my 45 under my pillow. Couldn't sleep. I was ready to pull the trigger at anything.
Yeah.
I was really, really not there. That was still extremely there. Got back in and filed my story. Got praised by them. Said, "Well, what a great story!" You know, I'm like really heightened awareness.
Yeah.
And in came a couple guys from the Mike Force, and they were mad. One of them says, "How come you didn't mention his guy's name? How come you didn't mention his name? How come you didn't mention his name?" And I said, What have I done?" And so they went out, and one of the sergeants came. He said, "Look, it's not you. It's him."
Yeah.
He said the man that was killed on that operation was a new Spec 4, and he was in charge of taking care of him. Yeah. And so that's how things evolve. Anyway, so I spent almost 2 years, a little short of 2 years in Vietnam. Other A camps where we took 200 more rounds in one day, 122s coming in, just blew the camps to pieces. That was kind of unnerving over and over again. And remember one of my teammates, we were doing a lot of intercepts and things. He was a former Marine gunny sergeant. Dick Langford was his name. I wonder if he's still alive. But we took one of these rounds coming in, and he grabs me, and he said, "Let's go." And we're out of our bunker running, and he dives into this crater. It's still steaming. There's shrapnel in there, and it's burning my arms. And he takes out his lensatic compass, and he slaps it down and gets his back azimuth of where this round had come in. And he goes, "Come on, let's go back." He said, "Back down into the bunker we go." He slaps out his map with the grid coordinates there, and he goes, "Well, let's see, this rocket trajectory is this way. I'm going to do a back azimuth. It came along this line right here. This range on it is so many kilometers. It's got to be over here somewhere. Look at the terrain features there. They can't fire from here. They've got to fire just below the high ground on that hill at this angle. That's where they are." And I said, "Really?" And so he gets on the aircraft. We got this Marine jets up, and we're in a place called not the Asha, but near Quezon. It was one of the camps near Quezon, and he calls this jet in. The jet drops this ordnance, and you could hear this go boom as it rolls down the valley later. And the pilot comes back. "We have secondary explosions on that," and they didn't fire again at us. So that, who are these people that can do these things? Because he had been a Marine, he'd done time on the ground. He'd had real basis. I mean, what we find in special forces, at least at that time, and I find it today, there's that if you've done time in the infantry, if you were on the ground working with troops, you learn the skill sets, you learn your navigation, which is extremely important. And even today, Dennis, I think I don't know if you know that over in ClinMed, when we get new students come in there, we have a lot of students that are X-ray series. These are guys that enlist to go special forces, no background, right off the street. Yeah, come on, man. But, or we have former Marines come to us, because these guys, they've got maturity, they've got discipline, and they want to be here. Yeah. And they are generally turn out to be pretty good. So that's how it works. And also, when I reflect back to those men I work with in Vietnam, who were the best at adapting to special forces? And I'm going to use this term, and I use it with true affection. They were country boys. Yeah. I mean, these guys were used to working in the wilderness. They were used to working with their teammates. They were used to getting up real early before the sun came up, and they were working till the sun went down, and they would take care of the animals, and they'd take care of the family, and they would do it on their own, and they were tough. Yeah. And who was as tough? The Viet Cong. Yeah. They were tough. And I saw the same kind of toughness in other cultures all around the world, working with the FARC down in Colombia, working with the campesino families all over in the jungles. I mean, you're up before the sun, and you're down, and you're swatting mosquitoes all day, and you've got either the Ho Chi Minh sandals, which are the rubber tires that they made, the Viet Cong did, and they lived off the land on these things. I mean, our rations with our teams, when we go out patrolling to keep our region clear of Viet Cong, we didn't eat meals ready to eat. We didn't eat MREs. We had minnows and rice. And those were the indigenous rations, where you'd have these little plastic bags that were about a foot long, and it had a little red line up about 3/4, and then below that, this little pile of rice in the bottom. And you go through the river, and you get the water in there, and you tie it to your risers here, and on your rucksack, and you let the water soak up for about an hour. And then you could go in, if you're made in a camp at night, and that's a whole nother world, is how where you stay at night when you're patrolling. It depends on what you're doing. But anyway, so you could take your C4, plastic explosives that we carried along to blow things up, and take about a teaspoonful size and put it under your canteen cup. And with whatever indigenous rations you had, like the rice and the minnows, you could put little hot peppers in there. And our Cambodes and our Montagnards, it was like going through the supermarket for them. I mean, by the time you were ready to set in at night, they would have all kinds of different condiments. You know, it was like snake, rat, anything else. You know, they chop these things all up and just throw them in the pot, and then they'd burn the C4. You don't want to stomp it out, but you could burn the C4, and it was so hot that it would boil your little stew in about a minute. And so it was like a portable microwave you had with you, and that's what it was. And so over the years, I changed my diet completely to minnows and rice and whatever else would fall in the pot. And my theory on cuisine is that if it stayed down, it's food.
Yeah, that's right.
So yeah, okay. So
That's true.
and yeah, so got a little bit off on that, but Greenberry Magazine was a very wonderful thing. To this day, I never go anywhere without taking some sort of documentary picture, which is why I have developed the presentation I do periodically for anybody called 50 Years as Special Forces Medic, from Vietnam to the Amazons and all the wars in between, of which there have been quite a few since Vietnam, trying to find something that I didn't have in Vietnam, and that was that I didn't do as good as my mentors, that I never could give back as much as they had, and I wanted to be better at it. And so that's where the medicine comes into play. I know you're probably wondering how I got into this.
Right, so in Vietnam, you were communications.
I was communications,
and you're doing the Green Beret magazine on the side.
Yeah.
So, you know, I guess of your experience in Vietnam, what got you interested, I don't know, excited? What exactly is the word for you? But what made you think, like, I want to do that? Like, of all the really cool things that you actually got to be able to do, why did you want to change it all up?
Yeah, so the word is epiphany. And it's like, oh, you know, that's what I want to do in life. And that came from looking at our Special Forces medics working with people. Essentially, our medics are like a Peace Corps with a gun, you know. And that's the story that the hometown never knew about us. But our medics were taking care of 50, 100, 200, 300 people from the mountains. They would come in with everything from leishmaniasis to tuberculosis to pneumonia to every kind of helminth and protozoa coming out every orifice, and truly in great need of medical care. And I watched our guys delivering children at night. We'd have artillery fire coming in, and they'd be delivering kids and taking care of the animals, pulling teeth, you know, a little bit of everything. It's like the country doctor that could do a little bit of everything. And I wanted to be that guy. These guys were my age, and I thought, what incredible skills. And the people revered them, the Boxy. And there were operations where the Boxy would go out and our Montagnards would be around the Boxy, making sure that nothing ever happened to him. While they would have the little tiger's tooth around their neck with a gold Buddha on top of it, and put the Buddha in their mouth when the firefight was going on, so that Buddha wouldn't see it and they wouldn't get hurt, you know. But for the Boxy is, nobody lets anything happen to the Boxy, because the Boxy can bring you back to life from the dead. I mean, I have seen that. In fact, Mike Rose, who came here some years ago and spoke to us, Mike, SF medic, Special Forces medic, he cites a story where he had a Montagnard that was sort of catatonic after a traumatic incident. And so he went and gave him the thumbs up, Boxy, Boxy. And the Montagnard came out of it, because he knew the Boxy would save him, would take him back to the tribe, would take him back to his burial land. And the Boxy said it, so it's going to be true. I mean, you're not going to die. And so that is the aura when you take care of people and make their life better. We don't see that today, though, do we? Oh, hell yes, we do. Hell yes, we do.
And it's not just, a third world, local, like even your own teammates.
Oh, yeah.
If you're good at it.
Yeah,
but you still have that kind of mystique that something that they have no idea about. Like the weapons guy doesn't have that. It's like, oh, you pull the trigger? Okay, I generally know what's going to happen. The commo guy, I push the button, I talk. Engineers, it blows up. We understand that. But medicine is something different. And there is something magical and mystical about it, that you take this strange substance, I put it on the skin or I inject it in the body, and crazy stuff happens and the guy is instantly better. It's like a hair's breadth away from being an actual modern witch doctor.
Truly a witch doctor, yeah. And you have to make your clientele by being that witch doctor. Yeah. And we know that is, that's not exactly the way it should come across for this interview. Right. But the fact is that if you do have the bedside manner, and if you do have the true compassion, it just blows right through, and they see you for who you are. If you don't have it, they will see you for who you aren't, and your team will go down the tubes with you. Yeah. And we can cite so many examples of this. I mean, in the pages of SF Medicine, specifically Detachment 101 out of Burma, that was World War II. We had about 5,000 of our people and about 10,000 tribal members who fought the Japanese. I truly remember reading in the book by Socrates, Detachment 101 in Burma, some of the accounts of our Special Forces medics working with guerrilla leaders who had malaria and being able to get access to them because he was a medical person and saving the life of this guerrilla leader, ultimately, which led to developing a 1,000-man guerrilla force. Yeah. I don't know if we'll have time in this interview, but I had this happen so many times in Colombia. And for example, I'll just throw right to this. I had been working as a medical officer on this one little village called Cuatro Bocas. And I'd been there about a year. I knew all the people. They were similar to the Montagnards, and this is fast, a roll back about 20 years difference in time to this operation. And everybody in the village knew me. And this is a village. We had no running water. We had no electricity, except for maybe some generators. We had no roads. And we only had river access, and the only people running the entire region were insurgents. And so in came this guerrilla organization from outside. I had been doing a medical clinic for my people. I had been living with them. I was like with them. And the guerrilla leader, he is shouting and condemning the imperialist Yankee and the multinational, and down with this, and long live our compañeros, and we will never forget the lives that were sacrificed. Viva la revolución. And at that point in time, he looks out in the crowd and he saw me. And he stopped in front of this oration. And everybody, like this pause, like this is dynamic. And he goes, and he points at me and he goes, "Aquí está Dr. Felipe." And he goes, and here is Dr. Felipe right here. Yeah. He's the one, And I what? Now, I could teach my cardiac class where we go the epinephrine, norepinephrine, the adrenaline rush, the heart rate, the eyes dilating. And that's exactly what happened. And my heart was pounding. And all the people in the village that knew their doctor, they're going, "No, not our doctor. You must be mistaken," is what they're thinking. He's our doctor. And couple of men with AKs who were burly guys coming in, and they were grabbing me up, and that was going to be it. And I thought, oh my God, another American died in a faraway land, and nobody would ever know. I had seen photographs prior to going in there of bodies coming down the Magdalena River, because of combat action. And what happens is they blow it up, piranhas eat on them, and the buzzards start picking away the meat and everything. And I could see myself going down the river like that. So all these things are going through my mind. And the comandante continued, "Y este es el médico," this is the doctor. And everybody goes, "No," and this is the doctor que salvó la vida de mi abuela. And this is the doctor who saved the life of my grandmother. And everybody, "Viva Dr. Felipe!" Like I could have been Che Guevara, and everybody shouting for their doctor. And he went on, and I was spared, and and so they took me around this hut, and there's a little man sitting there on this stump, and he had a gourd full of sopa de pollo, sopa de gallina, that's like rooster stew. And he looked up and he said, "Compañero, ¿quieres compartir un sopa conmigo? Hey, would you like to have a bowl of soup with me?" Oh, my heart went blank again. I noticed him as he was an old gorilla. There was a $5 million bounty on his head. And I thought to myself, be cool. Don't worry about the money. It ain't going to happen. You just keep working. Yeah. And that's the way it was. And I lived years in the jungle with this scenario. Anyway, we fast forwarded it from Vietnam to how I got to Colombia for 20-something years. Yeah. But I don't know. You have any comments on it?
Well, we kind of saw the before and at least some of the after. But so after Vietnam, you come back, and is that when you decide, like, hey, I'm going to reclass to be a medic, or was there anything in between?
Yeah. So I did my tours. It's not like we call it a tour because it was such a picturesque place, Vietnam. And so I got reassigned. Okay. Now I am qualified special forces and I got an assignment because I was still kind of tacked on to the Army Security Agency Special Forces, and they assigned me to a place to a leg unit. Yeah. Now a leg unit to Special Forces is like heresy, Green Berets with the legs. Leg is obviously somebody who's non-paratrooper. And so I thought my esteem is gone. Coming back home isn't what I thought it was going to be. And I was really dejected and down. So one of my old teammates said, "Well, when you go back home and you get that assignment, I want you to go talk to another old teammate of mine. And you tell him that I said hello and help you out with a different assignment. And you take him a fifth of whiskey." Sure. I thought, well, can you do that? I mean, I was like, I was promotable E5 at the time, and I had to go see like Master Sergeant somewhere. So I flew from California over to Washington, D.C. area. And I knock on the door, and there's Master Sergeant Burley. He was the guy that they did the sculpture of Iron Mike. That's what he looked like. Yeah. That was him, actually. And he said, "Yeah, what do you want?" I said, "Well, I bring greetings from Sergeant so-and-so, your old team." "Oh, yeah, how is he doing, man?" And it's the old bona fides kind of stuff. And he said, "And give you this." And also, he said, "Could you please help me out with a different assignment so I don't have to go to a leg unit?" He said, "Well, let's see. Gonzalez. Oh, Gonzalez. Spanish speaker. 8th Special Forces. Come back in an hour." So I killing time, walking around, pacing around, went back. He said, here's your orders, your 8th Special Forces, Panama. Now that, for those of you listening, that's not the way you go ahead and get your assignments. But there's a point in time where it is who you know, right time, right place, and if you're qualified to do it. So I was qualified to be Special Forces in Panama. My language skills, Gonzalez, were not exactly fluent. They later became fluent, but not so much. And so I arrived in Panama. I took the little train across the Isthmus of Panama, no longer exists, but there was this beautiful jungle canopy. I could smell the orchids and the flowers, and I realized that I was home, that there were no leeches crawling up your legs at night while you're asleep in the jungle, and there were no Viet Cong. Like, what in the world? Paradise. So what my job was we did intercepts on radio transmissions. And the 8th Special Forces at that time, they were famous. Not as famous as 5th out of Vietnam, but 8th Special Forces was in charge of Central and South America. And we had a lot of people down there where they were bad actors like Che Guevara. And so Pappy Shelton, we had some really cool stuff of his memorabilia. I remember looking at Che Guevara's fountain pen. I think, wow, on eBay today, that thing would probably be worth a lot of money. But so Pappy Shelton had taken a team, he was one of the team sergeants there, into Bolivia and trained the Bolivian Rangers. And although he and his team couldn't go in, they did train him and they were able to capture Che Guevara. My scuba instructor was a guy named Hapka. He had also been on that team. And so I met all these people. So you get the feeling like, here's this young 21-year-old, and he's meeting these incredible men in battle. It's like a Marine meeting Chesty Puller. It's like, who, you know, it's, or World War II going up and saying, hi, Audie Murphy, how you doing, buddy? You know, holy cow. These are true men that you would die for or with. That's how great they were. Where do they get the greatness? I don't know. Maybe they're just all country boys, you know. But so 8 Special Forces went through scuba pararescue training, went through language school, and then it was time for me to get out of the Army. So it was time to what we call ETS, in tour of service. And you have to go back to the United States to get out of the military, unless you had a job, which I did. I had met a fellow named Junius Byrd. Dr. Byrd was the curator of anthropology for the New York Museum of Natural History, a truly famous archaeologist. In fact, he was so famous that years later, it was his character with a hat and the looks and the archaeology working on expeditions that they later modeled for another guy that actually, the guy I'm talking about is Indiana Jones. Yeah. So I can say truly that I studied and learned from the great Indiana Jones. Yeah, I was archaeological expedition for several years, living in the jungle and learning archaeology, which we found a lot of interesting things, but that was pretty cool. So, yeah, anyway, so I lived in the jungle for a period of time. I did make my way back to the U.S. On a tuna fisher. The expedition closed out, the rains were coming, so we had to put fresh dirt over all the dig, and we would come back the next year, get rid of the fresh dirt and go back where we were. But I had an option of getting on a tuna fisher heading to Africa. You see where this young man's going. It's like he's not ready to come back to anything. He's somewhere else. And so off on this tuna fisher that had come from Spain, it was a flag of Spain. It was called the Sol de Ipanema. And on the crew half the crew had been Basques. They spoke Catalan. And the other had been out of Madrid area. So they were two, like Democrats, Republicans, only worse, on the same boat. And every night, the politics ended with the point of a knife stuck in the table. And so consequently, the cook, the Spaniards, we got fish, everything was fried. Vegetables were fried, fish was fried, everything's fried. So you know what that does to your vitamin C? It denatures, you got no vitamin C at all. I was drinking wine, but that just didn't have it. And so I came down, I had tuna cuts on my arms and stuff that hadn't healed in weeks, and my gums started bleeding. Scurvy. So we sat in a place called Punta Arenas. I don't remember if it was Costa Rica or Mexico, but I got off with the captain, and there was this papaya stand, and papaya is loaded with vitamin C. So I ate 21 slices of this papaya. I thought, give me that, papaya. And later on, I said to the captain, Captain, this is not the life for me, fishing tuna out off the coast of Ecuador for years on end. I'm going home. I'm going home. So I went home and went to school for a short period of time, and thanked one of my old junior college coaches for getting me into good shape. And I told him, I said, if I wasn't in good shape physically, I'd never been able to run like I was running for 2 years in Vietnam. I don't remember a single operation that I was not running, always on the run. And you think, well, special forces, stand there, kill everybody, and I was always on the run, always. And you'll hear different accounts from Maxaw Group, and those guys won't be cooking their own meals. They'll be loaded down with ammo, in and out, different operations, different missions. So I was looking for friends, and my friends were old Special Forces guys, and we all kind of united in what was this 12th Special Forces Reserve. Now, a lot of those guys were not Special Forces. There were a lot of wannabes there, but there were some of the really, truly fine people, and those are the people that made it. I was accepted to the medical program, and I graduated here in 1973. So I knew if I got into that program and became that medic, which is truly what I really had the epiphany, I want to be that guy. I had such burning desire. And the burning desire had two sides to it. One is, you're pretty stupid, and those are smart guys there. And the other one was but I want to be that guy. And so I played a pretty cool trick on myself. And that was, if you don't let up and you study everybody here, you may get lucky and even graduate. And I thought, that's my mantra. I'm going to do it that way. And I did. And we started with 64, ended with 7 of us. We didn't have recycles, by the way, like we do today. Oh, you recycle? Okay, 10 more times, you'll make it someday. No. And the war was still kind of wearing me down. And out of, so I tried hard, and my grade point average, and I still have my certificate and the curriculum, my grade point average was 86.9. And I thought, well, that's better than I thought, because the day we graduated, I didn't even know where I was going to graduate. That's how bad I was, And the honor graduate, minimum mine was 86.9. His grade point average was 87. I thought, I'm not as dumb as I thought I was, I'm not the smartest, but I'm not the dumbest. So I put that to use. There were no really wars raging at the moment, and nobody's coming up and going, here's the mission. And with the 12 Special Forces, those are reserve units. So whatever you do, you can come right on home and continue to march. And so that's when I began to think, well, I'm going to go out and I'm going to find what I didn't have in Vietnam. I want the opportunity to make life better and do it the right way. And so I became on a quest for the next 50 years to make life better for people that really never had the first chance. And so how do you do that? Well, you go out to where they are. Years later, I was in Salvador one time, and I passed out in surgery. We were in the jungle, and I passed out in surgery. And it wasn't because, oh, this is horrible. It was because I was so dehydrated that when I had to stand up for a long period, I just passed out. And I think we're doing an appendectomy or something. But, and my teammate at that time, John Paget, once again, my old teammate from Vietnam and everywhere else, he came over to me and he says, I want you to drink this Kool-Aid. So he was coming to me. I wasn't going to him. And I realized that what he's saying is you have to go out and find these people. They won't come to you. They can't come to you. These are sick people. They can't come to you. And so I went in search of where I could be useful. And the first place I landed was right back in Panama. And I met a physician. His name was Dan Groover. We'd closed out the archaeological site, by the way, and I closed out. And they offered me, as a Special Forces medic, my practice with either on the beautiful island called Coiba off the coast of Panama, where I would have 800 patients. Yeah. I thought, well, that's a pretty good load. Yeah. And a beautiful island, you know, they could fish, you know, and eat lobster and stuff like that. And, or I could go with Dan Groover to the island of the Sandblast with the Kuna Indians. They were short people. They had gold nose rings. The women wore molas shirts. These are molas is like a shirt in Kuna, and they have designs, the intricate designs of dreams and stuff, very colorful. And he had 35,000, and so I went there with him. Oh, Coiba, by the way, was a prison island, yeah. And so I thought, well, no, probably not so much, you know. And so first day I got there, I ran into this medical student, and he said, when you meet Dr. Groover, he's going to ask you, check you on your medical knowledge. And he's going to show you a little kid. And this little kid has sort of brown, rusty hair and kind of like a pot belly and swollen arms. And he looks real healthy. He looks like he's really rotund. And he's going to say, what do you see here? And you're supposed to tell him, well, this little kid has a protein deficiency. He has kwashiorkor. And that Dr. Groover will think you're really smart. So the same thing happened. Dr. Groover asked me the question. There was a kid, and I said, Dr. Groover, this kid has a protein deficiency. I think it's kwashiorkor, and he could use protein. Dr. Groover, oh my God, you're a Special Forces medic. You're really smart. I'm going to send you to your own island by yourself out there with 5,000 Kuna Indians, and because you really have a good knowledge of tropical medicine. What happened was that medical student was trying to get rid of me. You know, he didn't want any competition out there. But I worked with Dr. Groover for a while. We did, he was the most dynamic person other than Dr. Junius Byrd, i.e. Indiana Jones, and all my other great mentors that I'd had at that point in life. My years are rolling by now. I think I'm about 23 or 24. You know, getting more mature. Yeah. And so watching Dr. Groover, he would do a church service in the morning. He would do clinic, and then he would do make rounds. Sometimes he would go out to other islands and do things. He'd come back. We'd do some more surgeries. He'd read up, open the book, do the surgery, go back, do another sermon, and then the next day the whole same thing. He never slept, in my opinion. He was incredible. And so I saw this work ethic. So off I went to my island. And I'm a new arriving Nelly. Nelly is like Kuna for doctor. You know, now I'm converted from Baxi to Nelly. And after a period of time, I could cure what we were talking about. You have the magic. And I pulled teeth. I used ketamine. I did the 10 milligram per ml dose. Do a small injection on a child, and they would roll. The eyes would roll back in the mother's arms, and I would pull the rotten teeth out and pack them with gauze and send the kid home. And I would do these over and over and over every day. And so where I going lost in my train of thought, because we got a operation going on outside that's making all kinds of noise and helicopter stuff. But so I would deliver children. I would have the placenta laid out there, and the little grandmothers would come in at night from the village and then look in the placenta, my little clinic, make sure that they could pull out things for luck in the talisman of the little baby. But I think what they're doing is making sure that all the lobes were there, making sure that their new doctor wasn't missing anything, because these were the wise old women of the village. Right. And I would walk down the night with a little lantern and actually a little lantern, little can with a little rope wick in it, with some diesel fuel. This was our lantern. We'd walk down the village with that. And the little grandmother would pound on the door, and so that the whole village could hear this little woman pounding. And she would say, and this is Moo. Moo is like grandmother. Moo so-and-so. I have brought home the village's new baby. She had done it all. That's what grandmothers do, right? And so it was truly romantic and cool. I did have some difficulty with deliveries, and that was other challenges, but my power became so much. I was taken into the tribe, and we had this massive hut, maloka, and it was about the size of 2 Quonset huts, and there's a huge fire burning inside and a lot of soot and smoke, and they painted my face red stripes, and they were all barefoot, but they painted my tennis shoes all red, and we had 2 lines of men, and I was arm in arm with one line, and then the other line would weave in out till they almost touched each other. And the old men that you were taunting right in front of you, they would blow smoke in your face when you'd come close to them. And they had these big vines, so they blow the smoke, and I cough and gag and everything. And they do this over and over and over. And each pass, after about 3 or 4, they would stop and go and shout, "Yay!" and give you this gourd with chicha. Chicha is a fermented plantain drink that they make with saliva, spit in it, till it ferments. And it was really alcoholic. It had a lot of sand and stuff in the bottom. So you'd have to drink this whole thing. And that's how I lost my voice, with all the sand on it. And this went on through the night. Sometime during the night, in come some people and say, Nellie, this man is dying. I said, come quick, So I'm rushing out. My eyeballs are crossed from dancing all night, drinking, and the women are wailing. There's this husband in a hammock, and he's swinging back and forth, and he can't breathe. He's going, which is to us asthma. And so that epinephrine. So I go back to my clinic, come out with this little vial of epinephrine, and I thought, what was the dose again? And is this really epinephrine? I can't even tell because it was dark and I was drunk. And so I drew up a little bit, put it in his arm, and next thing, his breathing is cleared up. I can listen to the airways, and he is exhausted and tired and falls asleep. Perfectly good. And the women are still wailing. It happened that quickly because he's dying. In their eyes, he's dying. And so I lift up their veils, and I look in their eyes, and I say, "You're powerful, Nellie, has saved the life of your husband." I'm trying to build my practice and let the word go out that I'm the new doc in town, yeah. And so, and that works because women tend to talk to women all over the place, and they become very powerful. And so I became the most powerful Nellie on the island. Well, I was also the most powerful, very lonely Nellie on the island, because I remembered in Vietnam, you don't mess around with the women at all. And guys that do that are going to put your whole operation in big problems because of jealousies. And so I maintained the line, and I was lonely. And there was a Panamanian female school teacher. And I guess she was lonely too, because, you're the same scenario. But unfortunately, there was also a male Panamanian school teacher who was also in the same scenario. And one day I went over to her hut, and I got looking, I got my cleaned up and everything, and I knock on the door of her little hut, and he opened the door. And, oh my God, too late, and he exchanges some like unhospitality words with me. And I felt bad. I was hurt, and he was yelling, and I, all right. So next morning, really fast forward on this one, this yacht that had been off the coast there, some Americans came over and said, "Did you hear the ruckus on the docks last night?" I said, no, I was asleep last night. What happened? They had this guy with rope around his neck, and they were going to hang him. And the police were out there. They got rifles and everything. And I thought, wow, I wonder what that was all about. Well, shortly thereafter, the police come over with their rifles and everything. And they say, well, Doctor, we'd like you to sign this, that this man threatened your life. And I go, what? Who threatened? Yeah, that Panamanian school teacher guy. He's threatened your life to kill you. And we're not going to have that with our doctor around here. And we're going to hang him. No, don't hang him. So I said, no, don't hang him. But they deported him from the island anyway. And not too long after, the Panamanian lady said, oh, please, I'm so sorry. So you can see where the power of this whole thing went. And what happened was there had been a group of little women out there, grandmothers out there sewing their molas, and they heard this man threatening the life, because they didn't speak Spanish, but they spoke, and they knew that he was going to kill their doctor, and they weren't going to let that happen. So that was just too crazy. But that's the power of the medic. And he is truly a healer. He has the power to bring you back to life, and that's kind of what we do well. But I had to, because Dr. Groover also told me if you wrap vines and stuff around fractures, that stabilizes it. And you have to work with everybody. You don't want to overshadow them, but teach them and work with them. And so other Nellies would come by, and I'd give them medicine so that they could be powerful. And that worked against me a couple of times down in Panama or down in Colombia. When I had an Indian from one of the tribes, and I brought him on as an auxiliary, and I showed him how to use a syringe, a needle, and everything. And so everybody that came in got a shot. And we had stacks of needles and stuff. Everybody got a sore throat, shot. Like, what the hell is going on? But anyway, so that's it.
Well, I mean, a little bit of knowledge sometimes.
Yeah, be careful for what you wish,
But I mean, just like anything else, we go to these places, you find a person, if they're not a doctor already, but you see just a tiny bit of talent, you grow it. Yeah. Because one day you're not going to be there. And somebody has to stay behind. Somebody has to take care of the people. So you're growing, your force multiplying, just good medicine, empathy, caring about fellow man. And so, you're just kind of growing that and bringing forth, kind of new life into an area had none.
Well, the word doctor is teacher. I mean, that's what we do. And if they're willing to learn, because, for example, in Vietnam, on that operation where we had 30 killed and 140 wounded, there were 2 medics, and they had 2 little boys that were their auxiliary medics. And that's all we had. Plus, we had all the hands of guys doing the best they could. And those 2 little boys were orphans. And that's what else we do. So, you do what you have to do with what you got to work with, and that's what we're going to see in the future. So look at scenarios coming up in the future when you want to put on that GPS for your location. Think about that time in the mountains in Vietnam when we had movement of weapons from the Viet Cong down that ravine at night with little lights that they were using. They had maybe 100 people and a couple little pin lights. That's how they're moving down with all the weapons. And we were up there in the high ground kind of watching the lights move. Now try to call in some artillery fire with a GPS. in 1970.
Right.
Yeah, no GPS, right?
Yeah.
And so you had to be the master of the basics.
Yep.
And that was the Linzetta compass.
Yep.
So you knew exactly where you were with your compass at night, right?
Well,
Maybe not so much, yeah. And so think about using a compass at night. First of all, you have the elevation, the terrain features up and down. Then you're moving through the jungle, and it's night. And you try to do your bearing on a mountain at night, and it looks like a shadow.
Right.
And you're pretty sure kind of where you were when you set in your night location, then got up and moved because you didn't want them to hit that location because you knew you were being watched. And then, so what you do is you can call in a first round to see where it hits and then adjust fire. And this is the same scenario I did. Linzetta compass, moving down there, call in one round, see where it hits. It wasn't anywhere near where we were. It was like, whoa, so where was it?
Yeah.
You know, wait a minute.
That happens with GPS as well.
Oh yeah. So and then try like the old commo operator.
Yeah.
We built our own little radios.
Yeah.
Flashlight battery, diodes, CW. Cut your antenna to the resonant frequency. If you want to do like 7 megahertz or whatever, you divide like 7. Let's see. What? Oh, I'm embarrass myself here. 467 divided by the frequency 7 equals the feet from end to end on your dipole.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you cut that and you make it resonant. Well, that's what I did with my Colombians down there when I took over that. Was taught them communications. Well, that's a way advanced story, but and so that's what the old Special Forces radio operators did. Yeah. And so I thought to myself, we had Heritage Week back here a couple of weeks ago at Fort Bragg / Liberty, like historical Fort Bragg.
Yeah.
And I asked our radio operators, the upcoming 18 Echoes,
yeah,
what do you guys do for communications if you don't have the satellites? And I was surprised as well. We're using what you call HF. High frequency was what you guys are doing. Only we have different equipment that makes it. I said, is it, you send bursts on it? He said, burst, what's that? I said, it goes like, oh yeah, that's what we do. You know, it goes out real quick. Yeah. So, that's, and it's good to know that they still hold with the ionosphere. And yes, you can triangulate. But if you're moving and the message is out, it's hard to do.
Yeah.
And well, it's a little more easier with technology than it used to be in World War II.
Right.
But still, that's workable when all other goes down. Even at home right now, I have an old radio set that we had rolling code scramblers put in it when I'm working with anti-narcotics down in Colombia. And it has the rolling code scrambler, which means when you talk, it's not intelligible.
Yeah.
And that's what I use to keep my men alive in isolated anti-narcotic camps in Colombia, was HF radio, when all the other high dollar packages from, I won't mention the companies that sold them all this stuff that they couldn't use in the jungles, right, didn't work. We made it work with HF. So much so that we were able to capture drug traffickers, narcos, and actually get the information back or bring in or thwart attacks on anti-narcotic camps by the use of one little radio operator by the rank of like E1, yeah, communicating to a very powerful aircraft overhead with a bona fide pilot captain talking to that E1, knowing where to adjust fire, and he could do it. Unheard of in the world of military and police operations in developing countries. And we could do that because we could communicate. Yeah. Now, if you are on a team or whatever you do and you can't communicate, then you can't get in resupply, you can't get out, and you're lost. Yeah. So my word of wisdom to communicators or people working with your radar operators, know that man personally, make sure that he's on that radio 24/7 like we were in Vietnam. Make sure that your handset is covered up so that it's not getting moisture in there. Have a backup radio, have a backup handset. Make sure your frequencies actually work and test them before you go. Yeah. Over and over, the whole scenario. If you run through it, the scenario over and over and again, it'll work. The first time you didn't. Yeah. That horseshoe nail is lost. The battle's lost. the guys were all lost in the jungle because you had a bad handset and it wouldn't work, or your antenna didn't work because, over and over.
Well, I mean, hope is not a plan. So, that's why you test every aspect from different, whatever you imagine, the adversity is going to be. Is it going to work in this situation? How does it affect weather or altitude or whatever obstacles are in your way? You attack your own plan like you imagine the enemy would. How does it shake out? Does it survive? And then if you're really good, then you start, or maybe paranoid, then you start thinking of all the other things that could possibly go wrong and still attack your plan.
Well, with the best planning, it always goes according to plan, right? Yeah, we're out.
It never goes.
It never does.
It never goes.
And so I think of this good statement like World War II, where they were at D-Day landing on beaches, and there was a ranger captain, and they were supposed to hit at a certain marker, and because of the currents, they got swept over to another place, and they got there and they realized we're not even where we should be. And they said, "What do we do, Captain?" He says, "Our war starts right here.
Right.
You do the best with what you got where you are." And that's the way it's going to be in the future.
Yeah.
And so if you have your great mentors, and you have learned from them and practiced from them, then you might have a chance of, 50-50, because it's not going to go like was planned. And I can think of every single time I've tried something, the learning curve is less steep every time you try it, but there's always something going to go wrong.
Right.
And that's where you have to think outside the box, do things that maybe you get in trouble if you do that. Right. But it worked, Right. Great book that just came out, Pineapple Express. Okay. Talking about our guys. I always say our guys because they're special forces, using ingenuity to create an underground link to get Afghan interpreters and stuff out. That's one of on my reading list things. And the other one is a Socrates book, Detachment 101. There's another follow-on, Behind Japanese Lines, if you want to know about guerrilla actions in World War II. In fact, Socrates, who worked, he's over at the historical branch, and he did another book where he has a really famous picture in there of a young man in Burma, this 1944, and this young man has a T-shirt on in Burma, says Camp McCall. They're like, wow, Camp McCall. Yeah, I guess that was where? Fort Bragg, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, not Fort Liberty. Yeah, okay, all right. Yeah. So, so.
Yeah. But I mean, as a medic, it's not just the medical knowledge that kind of alters your environment that you're working with. It's, that human ability. That's what most, I think, things boil down to, is just having empathy and trying. And that gets you so far. It gets you into essentially anything and everything you want, is that just by nature, we talk to people. We talk to people like human beings, not just rank, not just position. I'm talking to you now. And you bring that human aspect, and if you're a good human, that shines through. That shines through across cultures, that shines through across classes, and people want to help you. And that gets you into placements, that gets you into positions, that gets you into opportunities that I can now occupy that space, and I can expand out in that with whatever other talents I have. For example, you and your radio communication, communication is just gear. That's just gear, but it's the mentality of this is what's needed. because I understand the problem, because I've talked to the people who are there. I understand the problem. Let me leverage this technology, whether it's primitive technology or it's massively high tech. It really doesn't matter. It's gear. Let me leverage this to help them in this problem. And oh, by the way, it's also helping my other causes as well. But we're all winning. We're all winning. And that gets me into new avenues, and that gets me into new opportunities. And we just keep laying our little footprints all over. We don't have to take credit. Our reward is the work that was done. And subtly, and maybe sometimes it's glacier-like, we slowly improve spots all over the world. And because we're teaching while we're there, those things just grow.
Yeah, I think there's when you look at a special forces team, you think that they kick in the door and rescue people or kill lots of people. But this is an incredible, talented group of people that are the term force multiplier in every single one of them. And what you can do, I mean, I hate to suggest that one team of special forces could shut down the country, but the answer to that is absolutely. You look at what we study in terms of target analysis. You know, how many grains of sand can you put in this generator before it doesn't work? And nobody would know. You know, I don't want to go into trade secrets on all kinds of cool stuff, but in my case, and I can tell you personally that what has made me with a greater vision on how to approach things has been 3 MOSs. One is communications, medicine, and intelligence. Yep. Now, intelligence doesn't necessarily reflect me, but it talks about the things you know when you analyze, for example, doing something, whether it is taking your family on a vacation or working to get your child into a university, trying to have to put together what are the requirements, who's important, fifth of whiskey. Now, I don't mean it that way to get your child, but all these different scenarios. What's the time frame? How many people get in, and do all your assessment. And you use those for the good. And when you use them for the good, you can't be stopped. Yeah. If you do it for yourself, yeah. But if you do it for somebody else, I mean, that is a huge, huge, you carry the banner and you can't be stopped. I mean, and you look at Mother Teresa, you know, what, little tiny woman, not big muscles, you know, yeah. no tattoos of barbed wire, nothing like that. What did she have? I mean, she had little tiny shoes, very little in her life, if anything. She's a great saint, right? But she's a better businessman. And that's the truth. Because you couldn't say no because she was doing the right thing for everybody. And so I'm not saying like Mother Teresa with a gun. I mean, that's not what I'm getting at. But when you step outside and use your medical skills, then people see that. Or not. I remember going to a doctor here locally. I had an impingement of a shoulder. I sat there, he came in, and he said, well, and he had 3 physician assistant students with him. And they would go, oh, yes, doctor, you know, wise one, you know, show us what to do. And he goes, and this shoulder right here, do this right here, and what we need to do is that, and how you feeling? Fine, okay. And out he went. And I thought to myself, I would never treat anybody like they were a product to be sold or something to be carved up. And so before the students walked out, I said, let me tell you something. I said, you never treat people like that, like what he just did. And they all went, we know that. We saw that. If I thought back in that scenario right now, I would have done this. Nice to meet you, but since you don't give a shit about me, you're on your own. Goodbye. You're not getting any pay from me, and I'm informing whoever's paying this bill about that. I need a little bit more human decency.
Yeah.
And that's what you don't do. But you be that medic, or you're going into an area, and my students, my medics that we're training, have listened to my story and said, well, how do you go into places the first time? What do you do? How do you open the door? And I said, it's very easy. You just look for the person in greatest need and you go to them.
Yep.
Whether it's a child with a bloated belly from Ascaris lumbricoides, or that little grandmother who nobody really knew what to do with, but she just happened to have been the grandmother to the entire population.
Yeah.
And the girl leader, and este es el médico que salvó la vida de mi abuela. This is the doctor that saved the life of my grandmother.
Yeah.
And you never know who is who. So you treat everybody with human dignity.
Yes. Yeah.
And yeah, even the animals. I mean, even the animals.
Because I mean, all of life is important.
Yeah.
To anybody, everybody. Like, there is no real person that's successful that is alone. They care about somebody.
How true.
They care about their family. They care about their pets. They care about themselves. A friend. Like, there's always somebody that they're connected to in some way.
Yeah.
Whether that's overtly or covertly, they care about somebody. Like, I'm sure that the guerrilla commander didn't announce that this is my grandmother.
No.
But he was connected in some way. And just like you didn't target the grandmother to help her, she was just a nice old lady that needed help.
Yeah.
But everybody's connected in some way. And you help one, and that leads you to another, which leads you to another, which leads you to another. And pretty soon, your network is a lot bigger than what you know.
I'll give you on that note, if you help one, then people hear about it.
Yeah.
If you help 10, people hear about it. What if you help 400? How many people hear about it? How many lives are changed?
Yeah.
And what is brought to you in terms of, in their eyes, of who you are? So when I was living in the jungles of Colombia, I saw a lot of children with cleft lip and palate birth defects. You don't see that in the United States because they're sought out, they're operated on, and maybe a little scar, and that's it. We have two famous organizations here, Interplast out of California and Operation Smile. They do great work. They have multi-million-dollar budgets. They take large teams and they operate on children around the world. I had a wonderful friend, Dr. Bert Famosoff out of Arizona, plastic surgeon. He and I did some time with the 12th Special Forces, and we were assigned with Individual Mobilization Augmentee Unit. That is, you take Special Forces, you reserve and augment them to an actual living Special Forces team. And we were down in, I think we were down in Honduras at the time. So I knew of his skill as a plastic surgeon. And years later, back home in Colombia, I was living in the jungle. I said, Bert, can you come down and we'll operate on some children in the jungle with cleft lip and palate birth defects. And I said, I'll set it up. I got the radio, and we'll meet with the directors of the regional hospitals out there, and I'll see if I can't get some tickets for you and some funding. And he says, well, I'll bring some medical supplies and we'll help out the little isolated hospital, of which are 467 isolated hospitals throughout the Colombia at that time. It was back in the early late 80s. And so he came down. We operated on some children. And that led into another one and another one. I put more than 20 teams into the jungles of Colombia over an 8-year period. And we operated on 400 children with cleft lip and palate birth defects. And we operated in areas that nobody could get into because they were insurgent controlled regions. Now, how we do that? So, yeah, the how is, how do you do that? Don't you fear for your life? And well, we thought about it, yeah, but we kept focused on what we were doing, yeah. And we just didn't go in blind. Yeah. We always had somebody speak for us before we went in. And our spokesman was a Catholic bishop who was of the region. And so I had known him. We had a friendship, and he said, okay, we go in here and everybody says it's okay. We'll bring the children out and you can look at them. And so over a period of weeks, I looked at a lot of children and I brought the team in. I already selected kind of what we could do. We're looking at 24, 48 hours of operating day and night, fast as we could, to do as many as we could. And those that we couldn't was a heartbreak because you're truly playing God. Yeah. I'm going to say, I'm sorry, I can't know your kid. Don't ever do that. Never steal the hope completely away. We'll try to get back if we can. But anyway, so we operate on these kids all over Colombia, 8 years. And on one occasion, in this hospital, the military, knowing that 2 American doctors were going down, they provided security around the hospital and everything. And so that the guerrillas wouldn't kidnap us or anything else. Yeah. Additionally, the guerrillas did the same thing. They had security around so nothing would happen to the Americans operating on the children. And why was that? Because these children were all impoverished children. These were children who never would have had anything. And these were directly or indirectly children of everybody. Yes. And it was that little grandmother scenario over and over. Who do these children belong to? They belong to everybody. And all we're doing is making their life better. And it was wonderful because you could see in the hands of a skilled plastic surgeon, Bert was fantastic. We'd operate, and we had little teams that I put together, all Colombians. Yeah. We didn't use outside help. And so everybody was local. They learned from the techniques. We did the anesthesia with what we could bring in. And so it worked well. And I set up HF antennas, communications, so Bert could speak to the family. And we left everything and made life better for hundreds and hundreds of people. And one scenario, I remember, and this is kind of going to have to build this image, and it is a little boy that was brought to us. And he was a beautiful little boy, blue eyes, blondish hair, and his face was open. And the elderly woman who held him in his arms said, "Can you operate on my baby, my son?" And I said, "Of course." He was like priority number one. We'll get him in because I know that you'll never get it and we can do it for you. And his life will be better. And as it turned out, that wasn't her baby at all. The birth mother had said, "He's a monster. I don't want that child. Take him away." And she came over and said, "I have no husband. I have no children. What a beautiful boy." Yeah. So we operated on him. And about a week later, the swelling had gone down, little tiny hairlines. And she's got him. He has little socks on and shoes, a little jacket. Beautiful, beautiful kid. And along came the original mother. "I want my baby back. I want my baby." You're thinking what I'm thinking. What a bitch, Yeah. And because there was no formal adoption papers, we don't know exactly what happened. Voice of America got hold of that story, and they ran the same scenario like, wow, what is going on here? Yeah. But so we did over 400 children with cleft lip and palate birth defects, and I took 2 Shriners Hospital for crippled children, 6 from that region that were, some of them had club feet, others had some polio problems, others some nutritional problems like rickets and whatnot. And Shriners out of San Francisco was gracious enough to tell me, if you can get them here, we'll do the surgery. So how do you get children from the jungles of South America up to Shriners Hospital in San Francisco? Well, first of all, it goes back to Special Forces Communications, Special Forces Medicine, Special Forces Intel, planning operations. What do you need to do? Well, you need to get permission from the family. You need to get a family in the United States that's going to care for them. And there has to be an official guardian family. You just can't, okay, we'll do it. No, you have to papers. And then you need to get a passport for these children who some of them didn't even have fathers. And then you needed to get them to Bogota, Colombia, where the U.S. Embassy looks over their passport and goes, visa? To where? Why? Who's responsible? What are you going to do? You got families for them? Who's signing the... So anyway, I did all these things, and it wasn't without challenge. But it goes back to Mother Teresa.
Right.
When you're right, you're right. And so these children are going to the United States from the jungle. Monsignor is going with us.
Yeah.
We know him. We trust him. Oh, the Monsignor is going? Passport. Go to the U.S. Embassy. Oh, Dr. Felipe? Again? Taking the children? Shriners Hospital? Yeah. Letter from Shriners. Got guardian families? Yep. Got funding out and back? Yep. How long do you think it took to get that visa? And most people, if you go to Colombia today to get a visa to come to the United States and visit, about a 2-year wait.
Yeah.
It took us about 2 minutes to get those visas. So I got all these kids up there, operated on, took a couple of years. Most of them are all back. I followed the last group back, in and out, in and out. And they literally came home dancing, all these children. The trials, these little children leaving Colombia, arriving in Miami with their life possessions, little plastic bags that they'd pilfered from the airplane. Some of them little bottles of wine, you know. And the last ones in line, they're checking all the bags from all Colombian flights. So we're going to miss our flight. Monsignor, myself, 6 little crippled children walking along. Last in line, of course. And then comes the ugly American. Oh my God. This is the guy whose t-shirt didn't quite cover the belly button. His body mass index was like, you need to be on statins, you know? And he's got Birkenstock sandals on, jeans that got kind of holes. I don't know if he tried to sew them or not. And his hair's like matted down. And he comes up with a usual like, hey man, all these kids with you, man? I'm like, shit, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? We're the last in line. We're going to miss our flight. I got my children all here. Reaches in his pocket, pulls out this huge badge. I mean, it shined like that.
Yeah.
U.S. Customs, he said. I said, wow, who are you? He said, come with me. You don't have to stand in any line. Go.
Nice. Yeah.
That was camouflage.
Right.
So when you go to those carousels in Miami, you keep your mouth shut. Everybody is watching you. But anyway, that was a wonderful thing that happened.
Yeah.
And we made our flight, got our kids over there. A couple of years, they came back dancing. I went back some years later to see all those kids. They'd all grown up. They all had families, except for one little girl.
Yeah.
Very attractive little girl. She was about 20 years old at that time. Long story short, that's my wife.
Yeah.
That's my wife. And so we've been together for 26 years now. And I can say I knew my wife when she was 11, you know, so it isn't exactly like it sounds,
Right.
but that was, she changed my life forever, became the center of our universe. Our daughter became the center of our universe, and Daddy does what daddies do in Special Forces, and that's you use the 18 Echo, 18 Delta, and 18 Fox to make life better.
No, really the last question I had was, in that building over there are brand new, shining little medic wannabe babies over there that want to be you. If you had any final piece of wisdom that guided you through your journey, what would that be?
Yeah, so brand new wannabe baby medics. Well, first of all, getting here is checking the box. At least you got a starting point. When I came through the program, we had some very smart guys. One of them had a Bachelor of Science in biology. So it wasn't too challenging for him. And he let everybody know how smart he was. And his grades were good. But he just really didn't care for what he was doing. And it came to the final week when we had what we call mass casualties. We had many patients wounded. And we had to run blood and do a bunch of surgery and anesthesia. We got blood for his patient. He ran it into his patient. And this is not human beings we're talking about, by the way. And then he took off. Matter of fact, really didn't stay on top of the scenario. Well, this is just one more thing after the other. The IV came out, the blood went under patient. The patient died. And the instructors, that's all they needed. They wanted him gone. And he was. He's gone. We had another guy. And if you remember, I went through, during Vietnam, very tail end of Vietnam, all my instructors had been mentors of mine in Vietnam, and they were hardcore. We didn't have in this program at that time contractors. All our instructors were Special Forces medics with years of combat time, physicians who knew exactly what they wanted to teach you, and then some, and raise the bar even higher, and nurses who were just as hard driving because they'd been Vietnam nurses, and they knew what we were going up against. So that was our cadre. So we had one kid, and the only way I can describe him is he was like the runt of the litter. He didn't have the muscles. He didn't have the background as a Vietnam veteran. I don't know if he was even smart, but he tried. And towards the end, we had the mass casualties. And when you give anesthesia, you put in an intratracheal tube and you breathe for them and you inhale the gases or your ether, which is what we were using at that time. And you know when your patient is recovering for it, when they start coughing and gagging on the tube, then you can take it out because they've got control of their gag reflex and can keep from vomiting and going in the lungs. And so about 2 o'clock in the morning, we're out here in our clandestine area, which is not the same place we are now, but it's here at Fort Bragg, historical Fort Bragg. And he extubated his patient about 2 in the morning, laying in the hay with his K prime, and the patient stopped breathing and died. So a bunch of us came in a little bit later just to check up on everybody. And this young man had his mouth around his patient's, actually goat's nose and mouth, and he was breathing for it and doing the compressions, breathing for this animal, and breathing and pressing. And he's got this snot running out, and he's got everything. It looks horrible. And And that patient revived and came back to life.
Yeah.
And we're looking at this like, this guy is got a heart that big. He is special. And so we told our instructors about this in the morning. And they were going, he did that? So that's your answer. Apart from the heart, you have to have the passion.
Yeah.
And that's what will bring you around to being one of us. You can't quit. Don't ever stop. You're always going to be tired. You'll never have enough time to learn all the medicine you want. But once you get through here, you got a lifetime to practice medicine, to fail, read everything you can, listen to the stories that are told, because that's what we do well. We're good talkers and storytellers. And then seek out those in need. They cannot come to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Phil. I really appreciate you talking to me and helping me with this podcast.
Oh, you're welcome, Dennis. My best to everybody out there listening. Come visit us here at the medical school. Or better yet, enlist and become a Special Forces medic. Of course, it'd be better if you had been a Marine or infantry before that.
Not a Marine, though. That's it for today's podcast. Make sure to go to our website, www.prolongedfieldcare.org. Check out our free downloads and a ton of other helpful information. Grab a bag of our fresh roasted PFC coffee, links in the description below, and stay on the bleeding edge of combat and austere medicine. This is Dennis for the PFC podcast. Out.